I never imagined the day would come when I'd be sitting in a tiny cubicle at my bank, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen. Yet there I was, across from a loan officer named Carla, listening to her rehearse the terms of a $50,000 wedding loan, as if she were describing the weather. Fixed rate, 5-year term, monthly payments of approximately $950. Any questions? Her voice was calm, professional, completely unsympathetic to the white-knuckled grip I had on the contract. Beside me, my sister Marissa leaned forward, her hair a perfect wave of chestnut, spilling over the edge of the table like silk. She looked radiant, all smiles and sparkly blouse, but her eyes darted nervously to me, then back to Carla. "Thank you," she said, voice too bright by half, and then she looked at me, expectant. "You still okay with this, Liv?" I forced a nod, even though my stomach was doing somersaults. I should have been ecstatic for her. Her long-awaited wedding to James, the man she'd met on that blind date 6 months ago. But instead of joy, I felt dread. I'd agreed to co-sign this loan because she'd begged me, tears in her eyes, reminders of childhood promises to always have each other's backs. And because, well, she was my sister, and sometimes family is the only safety net you have. But now, looking at the fine print, in the event of default, co-signer is fully responsible. I wanted to rip the paper into confetti and walk away. "Is there anything else?" Carla prompted, sliding the stack of papers toward me. Marissa exhaled in relief. "Nope, that's it." She rubbed her palms together. "I can't thank you enough, Liv. You're literally saving my wedding." I forced a tight smile. "You know I love you." She reached across and squeezed my hand. I know, 2 weeks earlier, she'd cornered me in my apartment kitchen, that same blanket of sunshine streaming through the window. I was making pasta, my comfort food, when life felt shaky. When she burst in, breathless. "Liv, you have to help me," she said, dropping onto a stool. I flipped the stove off and turned to face her. "What's wrong?" Her eyes filled with tears so quickly they shone. "I couldn't get approved for the wedding loan on my own. My credit score isn't high enough, and James refuses to co-sign. He says it's too risky. But I already booked the venue, the Rosewood Gardens and the florist, and the band. If I can't cover the deposit, they'll keep my money and cancel everything." I leaned back against the counter, alarmed. "Wait, you already signed contracts?" She nodded vigorously. "Combine that with catering, dresses, my dress, it's going to be $50,000 total. I can handle the monthly payments, but without a co-signer, I can't even get the loan started. Please, please, Liv, you're my only hope." I bristled at her desperation. "You didn't save any money? You didn't even ask Mom and Dad?" She bit her lip. "I did, but they said they already did so much for me, helped me out after the divorce, covered my rent when I was between jobs. They can't help with the wedding too. It's my turn to manage my own finances. I want to prove I can do this," I sighed. It was a familiar routine, Marissa, the dreamer, diving headfirst into grand plans without a safety net, and me, the cautious older sister, always the one cleaning up after her. But despite the frustration, my heart ached at the thought of her wedding, her chance at happiness after a rough year. I set down my spoon, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and walked around the counter to hug her. "Okay," I said softly. "I'll co-sign. But we need a plan. Let's sit down tonight, go over your budget, and figure out how you'll afford these payments." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Thank you, Liv. Thank you. I promise I'll get a raise at work, and we'll make it work." I hugged her tighter, my mind already ticking through scenarios. Cut cable, skip vacations, work extra freelance gigs. It would be tight, but I'd managed tighter budgets before. I just didn't anticipate how quickly my generosity would spiral out of control. Back in the bank cubicle, Carla slid the final page toward me. Signature line, bottom right. I took a breath, glanced at Marissa. She beamed as though I were granting her the moon. I sighed and signed. My handwriting trembled, but I made it legible. "There," I said, dropping the pen. "We're done." Marissa practically leapt across the table and threw her arms around me. "Liv, you're the best sister ever." Carla cleared her throat. "Congratulations, your loan will be disbursed to your account in 3 business days." We thanked her, stood, and walked out into the bright lobby. As we stepped outside, the sun felt harsh, unforgiving. Marissa chattered about how she'd pay me back, her plans for the honeymoon in Bali, the cake tasting next week. I forced a smile and tried to listen, but my mind was echoing a single thought: $50,000 of debt. On paper, I might have been financially solvent, but the burden felt enormous, like carrying a cement block in my pocket. We rode the elevator down in relative silence. When we reached the ground floor, Marissa skipped ahead, while I gathered my purse and adjusted my bag strap. I watched her so full of hope, so oblivious to the potential fallout, until she waved and crossed the street toward her car. I stood on the sidewalk, brain buzzing. Co-signing this loan was the right thing to do for my sister, but it didn't erase the fact that I was now legally responsible for her debt. Every day, I'd wake up with her financial precariousness looming over me. I tucked the thought away as I hailed a cab. Over the next few days, I found myself compulsively checking my bank account, confirming the disbursement had landed. Marissa was a whirlwind of wedding planning, dress fittings, vendor calls, seating charts, each text and email pinging my phone. She assured me she had it under control, that her bonus at work would cover the first year's payments. And I wanted to believe her, I really did. But when the first due date arrived, I logged into her loan portal and saw the payment was late. My heart fluttered. I called her. Marissa, the payment. It's marked pending late. Oh, really? Hang on. She sounded flustered. I'll transfer the money tonight. I exhaled. Okay, just please don't let it lapse. It affects both of us. She laughed lightly. Of course, sis. Don't worry, but worry I did. And when I checked again 2 days later, not only was the payment past due, but an extra late fee had been tacked on. I set up an automatic transfer directly from my account. No more trusting her pay schedule. If she didn't cover it on time, I would. I realized then that I was no longer just her co-signer. I was effectively her backup bank. My own budget began to feel strained. That freelance trip to New York, canceled. The weekend away with my boyfriend, postponed. Even my weekly yoga class became an unaffordable luxury. But every time I felt resentful, I reminded myself she was my sister, and I'd turned down a solid promotion to finish my master's degree. She'd done me favors over the years. So I bit back the bitterness and tightened my belt. The wedding day arrived in a whirlwind of white roses and champagne flutes. The venue was stunning, rosy twilight filtering through the glass conservatory, the string quartet playing Pachelbel's canon. Marissa looked like a princess in her lace dress, James right beside her, handsome and beaming. As I walked her down the aisle, my arms trembling slightly under her elbow, I felt a surge of pride and relief. Here we were, she and I, fulfilling one of the most important promises of our lives. The ceremony was perfect. They exchanged vows, laughter rippled through the crowd, and as the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the room erupted in applause. I hugged Marissa, whispered how beautiful she was, and felt tears in my own eyes. In that moment, I forgot about the looming debt, forgot about the late fees splintering off my account. I only felt love. The reception that followed was a blur of toasts and dancing. I sat beside my parents at the head table, sipping champagne and nibbling hors d'oeuvres. My boyfriend Mark kept me company, his hand resting reassuringly on my arm each time I spun around to watch Marissa and James gliding across the dance floor. At one point, I slipped away for some fresh air. I wandered into the conservatory's courtyard, a marble fountain bubbling beside lush greenery. I inhaled the night air, felt a momentary calm. Pulling out my phone, I checked the loan app one last time that night. The balance was still $50,000, the last payment marked on time. The early honeymoon package had been charged to her card, so I knew something had been deducted. Finally, I allowed myself to relax. I pocketed my phone and turned back toward the ballroom, with a slight thrill of contentment, just in time to see the back doors swing open. Marissa stepped out, alone, a bright flash of white against the dark. She waved, smiling, then slipped around the side of the building. Curious, I followed her along a shadowed path beneath wisteria vines. "Hey, are you okay?" I called softly. She turned, and I saw it all at once. Her dress, slightly askew, her makeup smudged, and most shockingly, a duffel bag slung casually over her shoulder. "Liv," she started, eyes flickering. My heart seized. "What are you doing with that bag?" She glanced up at the night sky, seemed to catch her breath, and then, as though summoned by some crazy bravado, she grinned. "I'm doing exactly what I said I would." A shiver ran down my spine. "Marissa, what are you talking about?" She laughed then, light, triumphant, and a little unhinged. She shrugged off the duffel and set it on the ground, unzipping it. Inside, beneath a pile of clothes, was a wadded-up passport, plane ticket stub, and a wad of cash, much more than she could have saved in 6 months as a wedding planner. I stared at her. "What? Where are you going?" She zipped the bag back up, swung it over her shoulder, and began to walk away. "Anywhere but here, Liv." My voice broke. "Marissa, this is your wedding night. The honeymoon. What about the loan? The payments? She stopped, turned, and looked at me as though I were a puzzle she'd solved too easily. Oh, the loan? You're the cosigner. Remember? I've given you plenty of practice covering my emergencies. Think of this as the biggest emergency of all. Bye. With that, she broke into a run, the sound of her heels clattering against the marble echoing through the courtyard as she disappeared into the darkness. I stood frozen, the wisteria petals drifting like snow around me, heart pounding so hard I thought I might collapse. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out to see a text from an unknown number. Thanks for the cosign, big sis. This adventure's on me. Attached was a photo of Marissa in the airport lounge, sipping a cocktail, her eyes blazing with exhilaration. I dropped to my knees beside the duffel, the full weight of what she'd done crashing over me. $50,000 of debt, a wedding canceled by her flight, and a sister who'd beg for help 1 minute and flee the next. Under the fountain's soft glow, I sank against the stone wall, tears mingling with the falling petals, as I realized that the only thing more terrifying than co-signing her loan was the knowledge that family can vanish in the blink of an eye, leaving you to pick up the pieces. I didn't move for several minutes, staring at the duffel and that smug text. The night air turned cold, and I finally dragged myself to my feet, slipping my phone back into my pocket. With the petals drifting at my heels, I stumbled back toward the ballroom. The laughter and music felt distant, an edited recording of my own life, one I no longer recognized. Inside, the guests still danced. The newlyweds were missing from the floor. I caught my parents huddled near the punch bowl, worry written on their faces in crease-deep lines. I slipped between them. Mom, Dad, I whispered. Mom looked at me, eyes red. Oh, honey. She touched my arm. Is she? I shook my head, voice trembling. She ran away. She took a bag and her passport. She's on a plane, Mom. My words were a whisper, but they felt like a shout in my own brain. Dad's jaw clenched. Call the police. Someone's got to find her. I pulled my phone out again and dialed 911. My voice broke as I explained, missing person, runaway bride, duffel bag left behind, likely at the airport. The operator reassured me, dispatched an officer to the venue, and told me I would be contacted. Mom and Dad pressed me to eat something, but I couldn't. I wandered through the now empty tables, picking up a program with the couple's names. It felt like I'd been swept through a tornado, every promise, every plan, every cent in debt twisting into chaos. The next morning broke with a faint sunrise filtering through my bedroom curtains, an insultingly gentle light for the nightmare unfolding. My phone had blown up overnight, messages from wedding vendors demanding payment or cancellation fees. My credit card company asking why I hadn't made the automatic payment, despite being the cosigner. Text from my boss at the ad agency where I freelanced, checking why I'd skipped my weekly check-in. I groaned and muted the phone. I'd never felt more alone. Every mistake I'd ever made felt magnified, forking over my credit to guarantee her debts, letting her use my trust as a launch pad, believing that blood meant no betrayal. I got out of bed and scrolled through my bank account. There it was, a $50,000 debit, plus another $500 in late fees. My savings, once a modest cushion, had evaporated. The freelancing income I'd relied on to rebuild my life was gone in an instant. I sat at the edge of my bed, head in my hands. Then the phone buzzed. It was Carla, the loan officer. Miss Rivera, she said, voice clipped. We noticed the payment hasn't been made. You need to address this immediately. I know, I choked out. I will. That loan's in your name, she reminded me. If payment isn't posted by tomorrow, you'll be in default. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Understood. I hung up and closed my eyes. Today I had 2 fights, one to stop my credit from collapsing, and another to find my sister, or at least understand why she'd fled with reckless abandon. I drafted an email to the bank asking for an extension. I am in the process of locating the primary borrower. Please permit a 15-day grace period. My fingers hovered over send, but I realized I couldn't lie. So instead I wrote, due to a family emergency, I need an extra 2 weeks to make this payment. Please let me know what accommodations you can offer. It was still a plea, but at least it was honest. I hit send. Next, I texted my best friend Maya. Marissa is gone. I'm a co-signer for her wedding loan, and now it's mine. I need you. I waited, heart pounding, until her reply popped up. On my way, I hung up and called my boss at the agency. I'm behind on the project, but I'll have deliverables by EOD. Sorry for the delay. She sounded concerned but accepted it. When Maya arrived, she enveloped me in a hug so tight I sobbed against her shoulder. Her knock on the door had woken my downstairs neighbor, Max, from 3 floors below, who poked his head out and raised an eyebrow. Maya shot him a helpless grin. He retreated with a sympathetic shrug. Once I dried my tears, Maya and I spread out the vendors' contracts on my coffee table. The florist, $5,000, non-refundable deposit. The caterer, $15,000, 50% due now. The band, $7,500, balance or cancellation. The photographer, $4,000. All totaled $31,500. I had no intention of covering entirely. Liv, Maya said quietly, you don't owe these vendors a dime. She's the one who contracted them. I rubbed my temples, but legally I'm responsible. Maya paused, then said, we need to find her. Then you can blank everything. But if you can't, you'll have to negotiate cancellations. She tapped her phone, dialing a number. I know a lawyer. I'll set up a consult for today. I stared at her. Thank you. You're saving my life. She shot me a fierce smile. Family is complicated, but you're my family. 3 hours later, I sat in a cramped attorney's office with a power suit that felt like armor. Attorney Dana Price listened patiently as I described the situation: cosigner liability, breach of contract, disappearance of the primary borrower. She took notes, then said, we can pursue a fraud claim against your sister, but if she's overseas and has no assets here, it's a hollow victory. Alternatively, we can negotiate on your behalf with vendors and the bank. Which do you recommend? I asked, dreading the answer. Negotiation and bankruptcy planning. She replied, we'll handle the bank first, request loan restructuring or settlement in a lump sum. Then we'll approach the vendors with a letter of termination. You never provided services. They might accept partial forfeiture of deposits to avoid litigation costs. As for your sister, if she ever returns, you can pursue civil action. I exhaled. Okay, let's do it. Dana stood and stretched out her hand. I'll send you engagement papers and a retainer invoice. We can start with the bank immediately. I signed, my pen trembling. By the end of the day, we'd filed the bank request and draft letters to vendors. It felt like taking the first step out of quicksand. That evening, I sat at my laptop drafting a conciliatory email to the loan officer. Dear Ms. Thompson, I am writing to request a temporary payment suspension under financial hardship provisions. Due to unforeseen family circumstances, I need an additional 30 days to arrange for payment. Please let me know what documentation you require. Thank you for your understanding. Sincerely, Olivia Rivera. I hit send, feeling a small glimmer of hope. Then I called Mom and Dad, updating them on legal steps. They offered to help with living expenses until I sorted the loan, but I refused. I need to own this, I said. I need to fix this on my own. They respected that and instead promised emotional support, weekly dinners, phone calls. It was a balm, knowing I wasn't alone. For the next week, I juggled calls, finance managers at the bank, the florist, who reluctantly agreed to refund half of her deposit, the band leader who let me off with a $1,000 cancellation fee, and the caterer who set a date for the 50% refund. Piece by piece, the obligations shrank. My savings took a hit, but nowhere near $50K. Each time I resolved a debt, a knot in my chest loosened. I realized something profound. Marissa had gambled on my love, but ultimately it was my resilience that mattered. I wasn't her backup. I was my own person, capable of steering my life, even when the ground shifted. Then one evening, I got a text from an international number. Hey Liv, miss you, having a blast in Bali. XOXOM. It was from her, no apology, no explanation. I stared at it, thumb hovering over reply. Part of me seethed for a fiery confrontation, but that anger felt like giving her power over me again. Instead I typed, glad you're okay, we're sorting the legal stuff. Call me when you get home. And then I deleted it and sent, good to know you're safe, take care. I tossed the phone aside, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. A month later, the loan was restructured, 5 payments of $10,000 each under hardship, manageable though painful. The vendor's refunds covered most of the deposit losses. I emerged from this crucible exhausted but intact. On the anniversary of Marissa's wedding date, I found myself standing alone in the now empty Rosewood Gardens. I had arranged to pick up some personal items she'd left behind, a vintage hair comb, a box of thank you cards. But as I walked the marble path, the memories felt smoky and distant, like a dream dissolving in dawn. I carried the box to my car and paused. I realized I'd spent the last month reacting, scrambling to save my credit, my pride. But now I wanted to decide what came next, not just react to her disappearance. That evening, I booked a flight to Bali, not to hunt her down, but to reclaim the joy she'd stolen from my life. I reserved a small villa by the beach and a spot in a week-long creative writing workshop. Adventure, sun, new friends, that was my prescription. Sitting in the open-air cafe overlooking Kuta Beach, I felt the salt breeze on my face and a wide grin spreading across my lips. I'd spent years cocooned in caution, now I felt brave. I ordered a coconut bowl for breakfast and struck up a conversation with a fellow solo traveler named Rafael, an architect from Madrid who'd come to sketch the coastline. We traded stories, his of crumbling churches, mine of runaway weddings and debt rescue. He laughed when I told him my sister's audacious escape. "She is living your story now," he said, raising his eyebrows. "But you turned the page." I realized he was right. I wasn't a character in someone else's drama. My story had its own chapters, bank battles, heartbreak, resilience, and now this sunlit chapter felt like the prologue to something new. That afternoon, I joined the writing workshop and read a snippet of a short story, an imagined wedding where the bride vanishes, the sister left to pay the tab and find redemption in unlikely places. The group applauded, and the teacher patted my back. I felt seen, heard, and for the first time since that bank cubicle, free. A week later, I sat on the beach at sunset, the sky a molten blend of pink and gold. I thought of Marissa, wherever she was, probably sipping an iced drink by a pool, the wind in her hair. Part of me mourned what she'd taken, not the money, exactly, but the faith that family always meant safety. But deeper than that was gratitude, for the strength I discovered, for the people who stood by me. My phone buzzed. It was Maya, missing you. Dinner back home. I smiled and texted back. Absolutely, can't wait to tell you everything. I slipped the phone into my pocket and closed my eyes, letting the waves lull me. Debts could be paid, vendors mollified, legal battles fought, but the greatest victory was reclaiming my own life, the one I almost let disappear with Marissa's runaway. As the last light faded into dusk, I whispered a promise to myself, no more signing others' dreams at the expense of my own. Tomorrow, I'd return home, rebuild my finances, maybe finally buy that little condo I'd been eyeing. I'd write more, travel more, trust cautiously, but live fully. And if Marissa ever came home, maybe we'd talk, really talk over coffee, not contracts. But until then, I closed my eyes and let the promise of new beginnings carry me forward, one sunlit wave at a time.